Good afternoon. I'm Pastor Cynthia G. West, your host. Welcome to your lunchtime special. Today's discussion, guarding your oath. We will have several noted and dedicated law enforcers with us, people that have given their life to this wonderful profession and have sworn to keep the oath of the loyalty of their badges. But before we start with our conversation, let me remind you of the King's Pantry. The King's Pantry is located on 30 Florence Street in the Bridgeport area. If you're anywhere around that area between 10:30 and 1:30, if you are in need or you know someone in need to be able to subsidize their food allotment, please go by. We normally have 6 pantries open, but since the pandemic, we only now really service out of one, and that's the one on 30 Florence Street. Get some fresh vegetables, get some things for your family. We would honor the privilege to serve you. Well, thank you for joining us for our lunchtime conversation with some of Connecticut's finest. If you wish to ask the question during this conversation, we're asking you to please place it in the conversation comment box, and we will diligently seek to ask our enforcers those questions. Winston Churchill says this: the price of greatness is responsibility. The price of greatness is responsibility. We have with us this afternoon our Assistant Chief, Carl Jacobson. The Assistant Chief is in charge of the New Haven Police Department Detective Division. He oversees an implementation and innovations of the New Haven Police Department strategies to please listen, reduce the violence, execute target enforcement, enhance legitimacy, and strengthen the relationship between law enforcement and the community. The strategy is derived from the National Network for Safety Communities. It's called Project Longevity, and much more he does. Won't you help me welcome as our guest, our panelist, Assistant Chief Carl Jacobson. He just went out. We're going to work to connect back with him. Also, we have joining us our Captain Lonnie Blackwell of the Bridgeport Police Department. Our captain has been a police officer for 20 years, where he has served fiercely as an outspoken agent of change in law enforcement. He is an advocate, listen again, for the higher education and believes that the knowledge is power and success is obtained through preparation. Our captain transformed the entire training of the new recruit officers from around the state of Connecticut as the first African American officer in charge of the Bridgeport Police Regional Training Academy in 2009, a certified police instructor, and also for him, much more. Captain Lonnie Blackwell. We're so grateful to have you, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon.
Captain, could you just tell us a couple of things about yourself?
Yes, I'm a 20-year product of Bridgeport law enforcement. I'm currently assigned to the patrol division at the Bridgeport Police Department. I've served as the commander of the Bridgeport Police Regional Training Academy. I've taught as an adjunct professor at Housatonic Community College, and I'm currently pursuing a doctorate in criminal justice.
Thank you so much for being a part of our panelists. I'm looking so forward to conversation. Also, we have with us Detective Rodney Valdez. He has been with the department for 15 years. He was in the military for 8.5 years. Our detective have personally come and trained us in so many different things of how to keep our church and our community safe. Well known for his love in helping and assisting wherever he is. At this time, let me introduce to you our Detective Rodney Valdez. How are you, sir?
Very well, ma'am. How are you?
I am doing well. It is so wonderful to see you again.
Same here. Absolutely.
I can't thank you enough for all of the times you've come and assisted us in our security within our own establishment. You've been such a great blessing.
Thank you. Very humbling.
Detective, could you please tell us a couple of things about yourself?
Okay, sure. I'm a Bridgeport, Connecticut native. As you
Uh-huh.
already pointed out, I am a veteran, 8.5 years staying there in the United States Navy. I transitioned immediately into this career, and I'm coming up to my 15th year now as a detective here in the Connecticut State Police. In addition to that, I also serve them in the capacity of a chaplain. I'm the lead and chaplaincy program coordinator for this department.
Thank you so much. And we have with us also this afternoon, we have with us Mr. Stacy Spell, who is a retired homicide officer, detective, forgive me, in the New Haven department. Our Mr. Spell, how are you, sir?
I'm well. How are you today?
We're well. We're so grateful that you also have joined us. When I hear the word homicide, I'm I go immediately back to homicide is my name. So I'm expecting to hear some wonderful things this afternoon with all that you've gone and experienced. Thank you. Well, in all actuality, you have been honored and you have honored us to join a profession that is must be dedicated. It is definitely one of the most honorable professions, but it's the most dangerous. On top of all of that, tell me. Oh, wait, before we do that, our assistant chief just texted. He's back in. Assistant chief?
How you doing? Can you hear me now?
Oh, we can hear you now, and we're so glad that you joined us, sir.
Yeah, I apologize for the technical difficulties, and I thank your people for getting me squared away.
Oh, sir, it was our pleasure. Our pleasure. We're so grateful to have you and all of the work that you've done, especially the longevity that I was reading about and the legitimacy back to the office. But I was just asking a question posed to all of my panelists. The profession that you have chosen is so highly honorable and it's so detailed. And on top of all of those wonderful accolades, it is the most dangerous profession one could go into. Could you just give us, wanting to hear your human voice, why would you select such a profession? Any of my panelists.
Well, I'll go first, I guess, since I missed out in the beginning. Stop laughing, Stacy. Stacy knows I like to talk. I started this profession because I wanted to help people. I truly wanted to help people in the best way I knew how. And I think it
Mhm.
started as a young boy. I had a stepbrother that got arrested several times. And when the police came to the house, they were very caring. They were very helpful.
Wow.
Helped us as victims of my stepbrother's crime, but they also helped my stepbrother. And I said, that's what I want to do. And I was probably 5 or 6 years old. And that's continued since then. And, that's where my passion for this job started.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Panelists,
Yeah, I'll jump in.
thank you, Captain.
I chose the profession because it's a noble profession. I have a lineage of officers in my family that range from sergeants to patrol officers. I actually have an aunt who's on the job now who's 70 plus years old, has been serving the city for 46 years. So I was inspired by watching them. My uncle was the first African American to ride the police motorcycle in the city of Bridgeport. So I remember, being at the parades, being inspired by seeing his presence, and just wanting to give back to the city that you
Mhm.
and just to help people, like the assistant chief said.
Thank you. Thank you so much. How about you, Detective Rodney?
Yeah, I think it's more rewarding than it is sacrificial. I think overall, I just wanted to do something that would bring significant change to wherever I go. I mean, obviously, coming straight from the military, there was some sense of pride and there was some sense of dignity, and I wanted to carry that over into another paramilitary organization. So I did that. But this career here gave me the opportunity to touch really human beings, and identify with them, and be that agent of change.
Thank you. Thank you. So Mr. Spell, since the time that you have retired, have you missed it a lot?
No, because I'm still involved in law enforcement. I'm currently the
Okay.
program manager for Project Longevity here in the city of New Haven. Project Longevity New Haven is a group gang gun violence reduction initiative out of the U.S. Attorney's Office. So I haven't left law enforcement. I left it for a short while, did some community organizing. But I came to law enforcement in the 70s because
Wow.
as a son of New Haven and a young black man, there would be areas that I would walk through in the city, and I would always get stopped, pat down, frisked, even though I'm carrying a fishing rod and I'm with a small dog that looks like Benji and a tackle box. I'm obviously not out for no good, but I was challenged that I saw how people in my community were treated by the police. I was fortunate enough to have a black police officer who lived directly behind us when we lived in New Haven. And as I grew, I wanted to be part of change. And I realized in order to be a part of change, you can't change from the outside. You have to do it from the inside. So I started as that social change agent, have walked as a social change agent from 1978 to the still very day. I am a leader in my community. I'm part of a nonprofit neighborhood association that has over a 40-year history. I'm someone that's involved in environmental justice as well as public safety, as well as building community and trying to get people of color to play a greater role in how their communities are policed.
Thank you so much, because it is so good for our audience to know that there's a heart in this, there's a passion in this, there's a love in this, and there's a necessity of this. And the fact that you would still come and join and do all of the things that you're doing definitely demonstrates the heart. And I believe we need to see that. I believe so many people need to see the heart and the voice. Thank you. Thank you so much. How do you deal with your families with this? How do you speak to your children if you have young children, or with your family as a whole when you gather around the dinner table? Especially now with all of this pitting one against the other kind of stuff going on. How do you handle it?
Well, I think you just have to be honest. I have conversations with the kids. My kids are of college age. They're actually out protesting, and they're not protesting against me per se, but they're protesting against what they believe is injustices and unfair procedures by law enforcement. So you just have to be honest. And, I'm somebody who wants change. I think we can do better in terms of law enforcement. I think the expectation of procedural justice and fairness in the community is a big concern, not just for myself, but for all individuals. So, you just have to be honest. When you're off work, you're a parent, you're a dad, but you have to have this honest conversations because this movement that's happening in our country, it's real. And it doesn't stop just because I come home with a uniform on. I have to have those honest conversations with the kids.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's wonderful for our audience to know also that your children are out there also protesting. That's the human part. I hope those that are viewing us and listening can hear the humanity of all of this. How do you do it, Assistant Chief? How do you do it?
Well, there's a lot of fear at home. And I have a 16-year-old and I'm sorry, a 17-year-old and a 19-year-old who are starting their lives, right? And I agree with the captain. You have to be honest with them. I find myself actually defending protests to my kids because they just think it's anti-dad. Well, it's not anti-dad. It's anti these set of things. They
Yeah.
also believe You know, they're good kids, good people. So they believe what happened to George Floyd was terrible and don't ever want to see that again, right?
Mhm.
So we build on that and we talk about there are some things that need to be changed in policing. And there's even more things that need to be changed in society. We pick the police because it's the most visible arm of the government, right? But look at the education system, the financial system, jobs. There's a lot of things that need changing. And the police aspect of it is the end result, right? The black and brown communities don't have as many opportunities, so they end up in situations that they're in encounters with the police. And we need to change that. And there was a great protest yesterday about jobs in New Haven and getting New Haven residents, especially in the black and brown community, better jobs and better housing. And, you know, that's what I kind of talk to my kids about. And they understand, but I would say definitely in the beginning, I had to defend the protest because I had to say, well, this is right because look what happened to George Floyd. And then they began to understand.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. When we speak of change, you make it so open and you make it so real, as if there is hopes. Coretta Scott King says this: the struggle is never a never ending process. It's a never ending. Freedom is never really won. You can only earn it in every generation. And I believe this is what our generation is striving to do, is to earn a greater dimension of this freedom. Detective Valdez, I know your little daughter. How do you talk to her concerning all of this?
I think Captain Blackwell said it the best. You have to be honest. It's not
Okay.
hard. It's not hard having the conversation. It's hard having an honest conversation. It's being truthful in that conversation. I was born in the inner city, so I understand how I was brought up through certain insecurities. She's not. She's born and raised in the suburbs. So I have
Yeah.
to explain to her and paint that picture clear to her so that she doesn't become influenced by those inequalities or insecurities herself, that she's able to see the broad picture of what's really happening. And then, of course, they deal with a lot of fear. They
Okay.
also deal with a lot of uncertainties. You know, is dad coming back home? And even in our residence, you know, we have to deal with certain threats.
Mhm.
So those are things that those are real conversations that I have to have with my family. And one of the things that I'm so grateful of, that they're so supportive, and
Wonderful.
they understand my commitment to this mission.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It is stated that there are 18,000 federal, state, county, and local agencies. There are more than 800,000 sworn law enforcement officers now serving in the United States, which is the highest figure ever. Pew Research Center speaks on Behind the Badge in January the 11th, 2017. And this is a statement. While physical confrontations are not always a part of the daily routine for most police officers, a third of all officers say they have struggled or fought with a suspect who was resisting arrest in the past month. There's a large gap of race as well. 36% of white officers say they have struggled or fought with a suspect in the past month. 20% of black officers say that they have had the same type of experience. 33% of the Hispanic officers say they have had an encounter like this. These racial patterns persist across, regardless of the size of the agency. What do you believe, and why do you believe that the percentage is so high for the Caucasian officers?
Well, Carl hit on it earlier. Chief Jacobson mentioned that the uniform, no matter whether it's blue, gray, black, whatever, is viewed as the first arm of the government. So people are resistant. There are people who have grown up, such as my family, that are from the South and that have had a legacy of having had a contact with the police that was unjust. So you will always find a small minority of people who view the police as an occupying force and as something that is to be resisted. For the most part, most everyday citizens go out of their way to obey the law and to live by the law. But we have a small, minute percentage in our communities that drive the violence and that take on that mentality that you're not taking me to jail.
Okay, the freedom part. The same thing, the freedom part. I refuse to go. I refuse to go. What do you think has happened now that we have all of these police programs? We have live PD, 48 hours. Is this assisting or is it causing us to maybe dream differently or see things differently? This is why I say this. Many people believe that you can solve a crime in 48 hours. So then they'll say, why doesn't our police department solve a crime? Come on, guys, in 48 hours. Another thing. It's always somebody that they know and they had suspects and they were able to go through all of the testings and come out clear. And so we are beginning to have this fake image that we know your departments better than you do. And in this fake image, do you think that it's playing any role in how people are now perceiving how you interrogate people, how you go behind the doors for victory? Do you think that it's playing any role at all?
Well, I believe sometimes the media and the shows can create stereotypes. So one of the things that I pride myself in doing, just teaching at the local college, is explaining the whys to the young folks. Because you can watch a TV show and you can see something that's not reality, and we're based off of criminal statute, right? Supreme case law. So when they understand that an officer has a right to take an individual out of a motor vehicle because that's case law, then they look at you and say, oh, I was told that you can't make me get out of my car for any reason. And you have to explain that if you feel violated, you have to listen to the officer and you can file a complaint after. There's a system for that. But you don't challenge because you may not be up to speed with the current laws. And we get on a yearly basis. Sometimes we get case law that drops and changes the course of police behavior. But sometimes individuals watch things on TV and shows and they get a false idea of what's acceptable behavior by law enforcement. And those things tend to escalate situations that, if you look at some of the dramatic situations we've had across the country, some of them start as a simple motor vehicle stop. And what I believe you can do and what I believe you can't do. And I think that's the fine line of knowledge. So individuals have time now to try to explain to the youth of, listen to the officer, go do your own research, but there's a time and place for that complaint. But to challenge the individual at that particular moment is probably not going to be good for either side of the equation.
Thank you, Captain, because I've talked to a couple of my young men and I've said to them, that is no time to challenge anyone. At that moment, the officer has the right. What do you think about that, Spell? How do you think that works with you?
Well, I'm not out on the road. The actual implementation of the things that I need to get carried out, which we would call like a custom notification, where the police, or in the past, myself, go to a person, explain, Pastor West, we've been hearing your name come up quite a bit. We need for you to make better choices. If you need help, we'll provide it. But having that clear, honest conversation with them. So I'm not in the position of having to deal with coaxing young men and young women out of cars. When I was still working, I found that having a sense of humor, having a sense of humility, being able to speak to someone, say, listen, baby girl, you don't want to do this. This isn't the time or the place. Come on, I need for you to calm down. This is what I need for you to do. And speaking to them as that uncle, as that father, as that grandfather. And that's made a difference. But that's the difference between the old school cops and the younger cops. The younger cops don't learn those skills until they've been on for a while. You can be 6'4" and 280 pounds, but guess what? You can't fight everyone. So you have to learn verbal judo. You have to learn how to de-escalate. You have to learn how to appeal to people without insulting them or making the situation worse.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. And that's so true in so many incidents. But Rodney, you really are on the road. Are you on the road driving every day?
Not anymore. No.
So when you were, how did you handle things?
I got to agree with Mr. Spell. I think that there is a difference between being on the road for quite some time. I spent my first 12 years on the road, but there is a difference. You have to. There is a sense of humility that you have to approach. You have to be understanding, and like I said earlier, I have to identify myself with that person that I'm stopping. I was stopped once as well, prior to being a cop, and I was questioned or interrogated by police before becoming a cop. So I understand what that feels like. So I have to approach that situation with the mind, I was there once as well. Identify, be courteous. And there is a time where you're going to have to be assertive and a little more affirmed, but not every case is that case. You can definitely talk somebody off the ledge, if you will, every single time.
Thank you. Assistant Chief, explain to us, along with your other fellow colleagues, what is the blue line? Everybody has a different definition for this blue line.
So I think the public perception of the thin blue line is police covering up for police, right? And that's not what we feel it is. I was wearing, and it's funny, I'm going to be honest with you, I would wear a black bracelet with a blue line in the middle my entire career, because in 2001, my captain was shot and killed. He was shot and killed by another cop in a training accident, right?
Wow.
So it was an accident, but he was shot and killed by another cop. The cop thought his rifle was unloaded. He was a sniper. He aimed in, which is something you don't do. You don't aim in on live targets, but he aimed in on a live target, and he did what's called a trigger pull, which is you practice pulling the trigger. He didn't realize his gun was loaded. It blew the captain's head clear off. So I'm not trying to be descriptive, but so I guess I've been a victim of police violence, right? But but I wore that bracelet in memory of him. I also have another one I'm wearing now that has his name on it. I wore this forever too, and then I switched to the rubber one. And I gotta be honest with you, I took it off recently, and I feel indifferent about that, because I don't want people's perception of their thin blue line to be my thin blue line. My thin blue line was in memory of officers that we have lost, especially Captain Al McGregor, who was shot and killed in 2001. But in what I think it represents to other people, and now there's something we teach in policing. It's how people feel about us, real or imagined. They may not, they may have a wrong perception of police, but it doesn't matter, because that's how they feel. So we have to understand that. And what Stacy and I teach in the academy is police legitimacy and procedural justice, which is, if people don't care if you arrest them, they care how you treat them when you arrest them. And if people feel that the cops are just and the cops are being lawful and they're good people, they actually adhere to the law more. Okay. And I attribute the spike in recent violence throughout cities in America to the fact that people don't feel the cops are just, and people don't feel the cops are right. So they're committing more crimes, or they feel it's easier to commit a crime. But my point is what we teach these kids is, and we even show pictures of young African-American men being lynched, and they're handcuffed. And we say, where do you think the handcuffs came from? They came from the police. So the police partook in these activities long ago. And your uniform is damaged from that type of activity and recent stuff, because it takes one bad police interaction to ruin the reputation of the entire police in the country, which isn't fair, but it's true. So you have to understand that. So what we teach them is, when you go into, especially whether it be a white officer into a black community or a black officer into a white community, that may be the first time they have interaction with police. So you have to make that introduction and make it right. And even though you didn't create the negativity in the uniform, you have to understand the negativity of the uniform to police people in different communities. I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh my God, yes. It makes a lot because it leads into my next question. The question I have after the Breonna Taylor, and then we all know that the George Floyd killing brought out the soul of society. Something happened in this that it just brought out the soul, the pain, the agony, along with the Rashad Brooks. But despite all of that, it has left a great taint on everything. How do you feel that we're going to shine up that badge once again?
Me personally, I believe community dialogue and partnering with the community, just to be honest, having open conversations, and just admitting when there's fault. Me personally, I don't like what I observed. I have conversations with my family. I think it was wrong. I think it was unjust. I think it pins law enforcement into a negative category. But instead of just talking about what we can do to change policies and procedures and general orders within the agency, we just have to talk about what's right. Because everybody's looking at the same video, and some part of the problem is when you tend to try to dissect it from the standpoint of a police officer instead of the standpoint of a human being. Look at the video, you can feel the pain for that individual himself, his family, and you don't need to look at a standard operating procedure to identify if a chokehold was banned or not in that particular jurisdiction. So sometimes you just got to be honest. If it's wrong, it's wrong. You call it out as wrong, you stay ahead of it, and then you further secure your other officers that are doing the right thing. But when you debate something that's wrong, I think that's when you have a lot of tension, and I think that's what we're going through right now.
Yeah, I so agree. But New Haven has started Eight Can't Wait, and all of the process that you guys have started. Do you believe that your community is seeing that effort that you all have started concerning the chokeholds and how you have to approach all of those things? Do you believe that the community is really acknowledging that?
Yes. For one, you have to admit that there were past wrongs. You cannot stand in 2020.
I love you guys. You guys are so honest. I love this.
The system of policing in America, which has been unfair to black and brown for centuries. We have to be truthful. We have to admit where we've been wrong. And if even for those police chiefs and administrators and commissioners who don't want to, we are at a point in time in American history where we have to address the systemic wrongs, say they were wrong, reset the relationships, and it's about relationships. The thing that give us a little bit of an advantage here in New Haven is that for almost 6 years, Carl and I have been out in the community. We speak legitimacy. We speak transparency. We speak to the things that people recognize. Carl is well known, has a reputation. Chief Jacobson has a reputation that goes beyond. So he's recognized as being fair. He's recognized as being a good brother. He's recognized as that police officer who gets it and makes sure that those that are underneath him, that they get it. And that if you don't get it, you will not be working in the New Haven Police Department. He leads from the front. We need more of that. We need more administrators to come out and hold what's called listening circles. There was a former chief in Birmingham, Alabama, and what he used to do is he'd leave his office without an entourage, without a bodyguard, and just start walking in his communities. And he would find himself at a porch, and he would just listen to the people. That's what we need more of. We got to reset the relationships, build new relationships, and aspire to greater heights.
Mr. Spell, what is the listening circle? Now, that I have not heard of.
So a listening circle is where a police chief, in this case from Birmingham, Alabama, said he would engage people and he would just listen. He would listen to their complaints. He wouldn't respond. He wouldn't try and debate them. In some instances, he would bring them into the police department and he would be the person in the middle of a circle and he would hear the complaints of the residents. and he would have someone taking notes, and it wasn't a time to respond or to doubt or explain, well, this is a manpower, a staffing problem, or this is budgetary issues. He would just listen, and by listening, people feel that, you know, you're giving them credibility, and especially when you act on their concerns. That's what we need more of.
Okay. That's very, very true. True. So then, Assistant Chief, now that I know how popular you are and how honored I am to have you on this, Assistant Chief, what would you suggest for communities to start doing just to understand better the relationship between us as we fight for this freedom that really deals with all mankind, not just color, but all mankind? How would you bring that into it?
So I liked what the captain said, and Stacy, about what we need to do to move forward. And the first thing is what Stacy said: we have to admit wrong and move forward. And we've been doing that in New Haven for quite a long time, and it's helped. It's helped our relationships with our community. So through Project Longevity, and I know Bridgeport does it too. And you know, through Project Longevity, we're not out there patting everybody down, going after the entire community. We have a small list of people because it's a proven research fact. There's a very small list of people within the community that commit violent crime. Those are the people that we emphasize on. Those are the people that, if we need to, we target. But we target them first with a caring message. We want you safe, alive, and out of jail. And people have been able to buy in. Our community members have been able to buy into that because we're going to you first, saying your name's coming up, you're hot, you could be either shot or a shooter, and we want you safe, alive, and out of jail. And here's some resources to do that. But if you don't change your life, then we're going to have to target you with the full force of the federal authorities and us and whatnot. And that's really made a difference here. It's really changed a lot, and we've been able to cut our violence in half. And what I would say for that, back to what you asked, police need the consent of the community. And I keep hearing that, and I kind of looked into it, and it's true. The community has to say, okay, we believe the police are just. We want the police to be here, and we want the police to do this. And I think we're going through an adjustment phase in this country of figuring out, well, what do you want the police to be? I mean, look at the area in Chicago where they just, not Chicago, excuse me, Seattle, the CHOP area. They got rid of the police. We don't want the police in this area. So the police didn't go in that area. There was a couple murders, a couple shootings, and they wanted the police back. So I don't think we should waste time with that and lead to senseless deaths. But I think we need to, as a community, as the police in the community, sit down and determine what we want from our police, what policing in America looks like. We are burdened with everything: firework, mental health, substance abuse, homelessness. I could go on for an hour and never end because that's what we have to deal with. And that's not fair to these officers. They are not trained in substance abuse, mental health. They are to some degree, but not enough. So let's back off some of these pieces and give it to other avenues within the city. Let's find a way to take care of our cops in that way and then move on with the community so the community still gets what it needs. What's happened in this country is, through budgetary reasons and everything else and different political affiliations, we've lost our way in the way of mental health, substance abuse. And these are issues that lead to police violence and police death at the hands of police. So let's change this stuff. This should be an opportunity. Every police chief in this country and ranking official like the cap here, and even down to Detective Valdez, we need to use this as an opportunity to change policing for the positive of the community, but also for the positive of the officers. Now, I tell you how good Project Longevity is, and here's a terrible fact. You said 18,000 police agencies, 18,000. You know how many do Project Longevity with the National Network of Safe Communities? 23.
No, sir.
23.
Okay.
And you're looking at two agencies right here, which I respect, the Bridgeport Police. They do it as well. But I mean, 23? You have a great program where you're offering people help instead of locking them up. And we've actually reduced that violence. And I want to add this. We've cut that violence in half with less arrests. That sounds good, right? Let's cut the violence with less arrests. That's great stuff. But only 23 of 18,000 agencies do it? Come on, So that's my point. There's a lot of change to be made. And I think Bridgeport and New Haven are ahead of the curve, but there's other people who need to get it going.
Okay, thank you. Well, Captain, because my church is located under you and you're our protector, which we're grateful for, what can we do even more? Right now, we do have a lot of community projects coming through our church, as you probably already know, and we do a lot with our youth also. But what can we do more? What can clergy do to make it even easier? Because this is a broad band here.
Yeah. Well, some of the relationships that I consider sustainable have been through the clergy. So I think the churches, when they bring youth into our world, those relationships tend to last longer. Those individuals call you up personally, they send you a text, see how you're doing, ask you for help, identify programs. So I think, collectively together, if the clergy and law enforcement redirect the youth, I think it sends a stronger message. I go out and have the community meetings myself. I'm in every meeting from NRZ to NAACP to Minority Business Association, right to the meetings and the housing projects. But that missing ingredient of a combined effort is apparent. And sometimes you get a lot more motivation with the youth through the clergy to the police, as opposed to me going directly into the environment, trying to get them to buy into what I'm trying to accomplish. So I think if we collectively do it together and have more programs, for say at the church or events that are connected to the clergy, I think we're going to have better results with the youth.
Okay, because Detective Valdez has been in our church, I don't know how many times, to show us the different routes of how to keep the community safe, how to escape certain things. And you said something that I'm not quite sure of, and I need you to explain to me. When you said youth into our world, what does that mean to bring the youth into your world? Captain,
So that's for me. Okay. So
yes.
bringing the youth into our world. So we need assistance, with the youth identifying what exactly we do as law enforcement officers. And sometimes you need buy-in from individuals that they have more trust for. And, I could speak for Bridgeport. There's a lot of trust and value when it comes to the local clergy and pastors. And generally, when we have those youth come to a police sanctioned meeting, we get a better end result when those relationships are built through the clergy. Now, we do go out, like Assistant Chief said, with Project Longevity. Those are different targeted reasons because you've identified an individual that's already possibly in the criminal element. But we've seen a lot of success with individuals that come through the programs with the clergy and are identified by the pastors and clergy and create that relationship. One of the other things that I notice when I go to my meetings, I always try to identify the resources that are available. And it doesn't matter where you go, what side of town. Most people don't even realize that a Police Explorer program exists. They don't realize that there's, we used to have this program in Bridgeport that we're trying to resurrect called the Young Adult Police Commissioners. So we need to get that information out to the public a lot sooner and in a more efficient way so we can attract these youth to positive programs. Because a lot of people are doing a lot of different things, but we don't really have a nucleus that combines all the efforts of all individuals for the kids to come together.
Well, definitely. How can our church become effective and become a part of any of that? I did not know it existed. I really didn't.
Yeah, I can give you the information, but we do have a robust Police Explorer program. We actually have individuals that come from high school and they've actually became Bridgeport law enforcement officers as we speak today.
That's great.
Yeah, so we definitely have it, but we need to expand on that. Like the things that work, I think we should expand on. And sometimes we're stuck in trying to address bigger issues, but we lose sight of the individuals that are actually doing the right thing, that are going to school, obeying all the social norms and universal codes in society. And sometimes they fall to the wayside because we concentrate so much on fixing issues. But I'm a believer in trying to promote what's working already and trying to build off of that.
I agree with you. If it's working, let's make it keep working. Okay, we're almost done with our little conversation. Lunchtime is almost over. Let me hear you guys take on wearing the body cam? Are you for it? Are you against it? What's your take on the body cam?
Um, I'll go first. I'm 1,000% for it. I wish we had it 20 years ago. I've actually been a member of two different law enforcement agencies for 23 years now. And we got body cameras maybe 3 or 4 years ago. It not only changes the behavior of the police that you want to change their behavior, but it also changes the behavior of the community members because they know they're being recorded. So I think the interactions are much better on both sides. And
Okay.
I would also say that when there is internal affairs complaints, it more than usually clears the officer because it's all recorded. But everybody sees situations as different, and it's an opportunity to sit down with a body camera. Say someone comes in and complains and says, "Hey, I was treated unfairly by this officer." You actually have a record of that, so you can sit down with the body camera, both watch it, and mitigate an understanding between the two. So that's a move forward. So we like to try to do that, and I'm going to be honest, that doesn't happen often. But if we're able to do that, we have a great Lieutenant Zanelli in Internal Affairs that will actually sit down and have a conversation between the officer and the community member, and the officer can say, "Well, see here, when I say this, this is what I meant. I know you took it this way, but you know what I mean." And I just think they're very, very important. Obviously, they're a record if there's an officer-involved shooting or some kind of violence. It shows, but there are holes in it. You're not going to see, the body camera doesn't see exactly what I see. Body camera doesn't see exactly what the community member sees too. But I haven't seen it in a negative at all. I would say it's definitely positive. We thought there would be issues with data storage and stuff like that, and there haven't been. It is difficult because you have Freedom of Information Act, and you have to act quickly and get this information out to people. Sometimes you have to edit body cameras to protect victims. But I think the positives way outweigh the negatives.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. On your watch, what do you guys want to see on your watch?
On my watch, what I would like to see is I would love for not only the churches and the clergy, who, in my opinion, and I am a man of faith, I am an ordained deacon. I am the chairman of the deacon board at Pitts Chapel Unified Free Will Baptist Church here in New Haven. But I think the church has lost their way. The church needs to find a vehicle so that they can proselytize, that they can find their way out into the community. It does no good to have a name that resounds nationally. But if you were to exit your church doors and walk a block in either direction and no one knows who you are, it's for naught. I would like to see the churches. I'd like to see everyday people, the non-traditional leaders of our neighborhoods. I'd like to see them become more involved and go back to the village mentality. It's one thing about people of color. When we were in segregation and we lived in communities where we had group accountability, where we maintained the order without having the police because we were fearful of bringing the police in. We need to bring that back in. But the only way that's going to happen is if people stop pointing that one finger and remember that there are three fingers pointing back at you. Don't talk about it. Be about it. Be about change. You want to see change, you have to get involved. If you want to see a change in your police departments, you have to become part of your police departments, whether it's a civilian review board, whether it's becoming a police officer, whether it's becoming part of just networking and working with the police. We are at a time in our country where collaboration we know works. We know the civil rights movement. When we link arms together, we can move mountains. But when we are operating in our silos and Chief Jacobson is speaking about one thing in his community, Captain Blackwell is speaking about something totally different in his community, Detective Valdez is speaking about, we lose that concerted energy. Whereas when we focus and we link arms and put our power together, unite our voices, speak with a clear and demanding voice that we want to play a role, and as well as holding those in our communities that we know are sociopaths and psychopaths. I don't care if it's Bishop so-and-so's son, or it's Assistant Chief so-and-so's son, or Officer so-and-so's son. We need to hold them accountable, and we need to be able to deal with them. That's when we're going to get greater change in our community. As long as we leave policing and how our communities are governed up to others, especially who don't live there, we're going to have the same results. It's time out for just talking about it. It's time out for working together, having a unified voice, and speaking with civility, with peace, and with love, and trying to come to a good understanding.
Thank you. How about you, Detective Valdez? What do you want to see on your watch?
I definitely want to see a cohesion. I want to see a synergy between our communities and law enforcement agencies. I think, as Mr. Spell said, absolutely, we want the community to hold community accountable, just as they're holding us accountable. And we would do all our best to hold our own accountable as we're attempting to hold the community accountable for their actions as well. So we can have a synergy. And that would only come through involvement. You have to be involved with the police. You have to kind of come and walk in our shoes for a little bit. And if you can't walk in our shoes, then walk in our mindset, and you're going to understand.
Yes. Captain?
Yeah, on that same note, I'd like to see professionalism. I like to see officers going out, conducting themselves in a professional manner. I like to see positivity when it comes to the use of discretion, procedural justice, just fairness out there when you're dealing with the community, giving the same type of a break on a simple infraction that you would expect, done in your hometown, wherever you might live, or your family. Because the one thing that we're not addressing is, police do have discretion to enforce basic wrongs, unless they're of a felony nature or something that, is prescribed. So I think part of the police legitimacy is individuals in the community feeling like they're over-policed, or they're receiving treatment that might be different than other individuals in different areas or different, municipalities, jurisdictions. So I think if we go out with a positive attitude, try to get individuals to respect us, because it's at the point where we have to earn that respect back, and that trust has to be earned. And like I told my chief yesterday, we had a lot of individuals that had their perception on policing, and they're very outspoken. So I said, why don't you recruit them? I could tell you about a story in New Haven that these two gentlemen know of, but Shafiq Abdul-Sabbar was a community activist, and they were big on community policing in New Haven. So the chief got Shafiq to get on board because he recruited him. So you recruit some of these individuals, and you make them come on the job, and you let them learn the ropes and let them affect the change, and you do it with them. You have that synergy, but instead of a us versus them attitude, you recruit these individuals that want to see policing a different way, and you recruit them in large numbers, and they go through our academies, and then they learn the process and the application of laws and statutes, and then we come back to the table, because now you have individuals that came forward with their impression of what's right and wrong, and now they're part of the solution. So request them to come get on board with us, and let's do this together.
Thank you, sir. Assistant Chief, what do you want to see?
So I want to see community members call out good behavior by police just as much as bad behavior, right? There are 3 million, it's something crazy like 3 million police and community interactions in this country every day. And, one George Floyd is way too much, but I'm just saying there's 3 million interactions that ended peacefully and the police helping somebody. So we need to acknowledge that. The community needs to acknowledge that. And I like what the cap said about let's get more people from the community into the police department. We're pretty good in New Haven in minority and women officers. We have 47%, but that should be higher in New Haven because the population is different in New Haven. And I think part of that is something I saw that was terrible. I liked some of the protests. We had 5,000 people in front of police station one day singing and dancing and peaceful, and it was awesome. And then another day they were lined up and they were yelling at the cops, but they were particularly picking on the African-American cops. And that bothers me because you're going to fight racism with racism. So let's be fair to all the police officers. Let's get more police officers from the community, like Cap said. That's great. We need more police officers from the community on our force. And call out good behavior. Call out good behavior.
Yeah.
Call out good cops. Say we want our cops in New Haven to be like Stacy Spell. Because there's a lot of Stacy Spells and Carl Jacobsons on the New Haven Police Department. I'm sure there is in Bridgeport too. I know a lot myself, and we need to support those guys. And I saw something in the paper today that caught my attention, and they talked about people feel the police are very powerful with their badges and guns. And it's actually the opposite, to be honest with you. So when you see a lack of support from places like the community, political entities, just everybody right now doesn't support us, correct? And that makes the police change what they do, and it pulls them back. And even the good cops feel timid to do their job. And I think you're seeing that in the country right now with a sharp increase in violence. And we need to change that. We need to support the good cops, get rid of the bad cops, and move forward as a community.
Thank you. There's an African proverb that states, one who lives in the house knows where the roof leaks. You have surely showed us where some of the leaks are in the house that we live in. Thank you for your time with everything that's happened in both cities, both in Bridgeport, also in New Haven. You would come and do this. This shows your dedication just to get the human touch back again. Thank you for your time. Thank you for this conversation. It has been just awesome. And Chief, Assistant Chief, thank you for saying we could get more women. A plug for women. A plug for women somewhere. Guys, I appreciate you so much. Thank you again. I believe that we have been successful in showing the human touch, the honor behind the badge and the oath. God bless you. Audience, we appreciate you and we thank you so much for joining in. We had technical difficulties, but understand we will have it on record. We will have it on record. You can come back and see it all in full. God bless you. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.